Okay, today we are talking about the level 3 elimination assignment. And we're going to start with problem number 2. Now, when we are eliminating, our sole task is to find a variable such as x, y, or z that when we add them together, we eliminate one of the variables. So, in this case, we have 3 equations and 3 variables. So I need to pick 2 of the equations and try and eliminate one variable. So I'm going to choose the first 2. So when I choose the first 2 and add them, I end up getting 2x plus 0y, because 3 plus negative 3y is 0, plus z. The z's, I get 0z, because 1z plus a negative z equals 0. And all of that equals negative 6, because 1 plus negative 7 is that. So I get 2x is equal to negative 6. Therefore, when I divide by 2, x equals negative 3. Now that I know that, I'm going to do the same thing again this time. But instead, I'm going to take the first and third line. So in this one, when I add, I had negative x here. Sorry, I kind of wrote over it. Oh no, sorry, that's a positive x. Yeah, positive x. Sorry about that. So now when I add, I get 0x, I get 9y, I get 0z, and that all equals 0. And so I get 9y is equal to 0, and when I divide by 9, I get y equals 0. Well, now I have 2 points. So now I can take these 2 points and plug it into my equation. So I end up with 3 times 3, because I chose this one. 3 times 3 minus 3y, which is 3 times 0, minus z equals negative 7. Well, I get 9 minus 0 minus z equals negative 7. Well, if I subtract 9 from both sides, I end up with negative z is equal to negative 16, and divide by negative 1, I get z equals 16. So now the real fun comes into play, where I plug in all my points. So I have negative x, which is a negative, oh, I'm so sorry. This is wrong, because this was a negative 3, which means that's a negative 9, and I must now add 9 to both sides. So instead of z being negative 16, is actually going to be negative 2. Sorry about that, because I add 9, I get 2. When I divide by negative 1, I get negative 2. So now when I plug that in to solve, I have x, which is negative 3, so this is going to be 3 plus my y, which is 3 times 0, plus z, which is negative 2, so minus 2, which needs to equal 1. Well, 3 plus 0 minus 2 needs to equal 1, and therefore 1 equals 1. So it works. If you don't believe me, check it again by plugging it into the bottom equation. We get negative 3 plus 6 times 0 plus 2, because minus 2 is a positive 2, and this needs to equal negative 1. Well, negative 3 plus 2 equals negative 1. Therefore, negative 1 equals negative 1. And once again, it works. So your answer for this problem is going to be x equals negative 3, y equals 0, and z equals negative 2. So as you can see, even with a blunder like misadding or something, or substituting incorrectly for the elimination, you can still correct yourself by checking. And so in this problem, the big thing was looking for which variables I could go ahead and add without manipulating anything and eliminate that variable. So here we start with the first 2, because I was going to get rid of y's and z's. And then we went with the first and the third one because I got rid of x's and z's. So that was really nice for us, so we were able to quickly find one variable and then plug it into our last equation. But what happens when it's not so nice to us, like in question 3? So let's take a look at that. In question 3, we have negative 5x minus 15 minus 4z. Minus 15y minus 4z equals negative 11. Negative 6x plus 5y minus 4z equals negative 10. And x plus 5y plus 4z equals 15. Well, even here, if we look, the easiest one for us to start with would be the first and either the first and third or the first and second one. Sorry. So I'm going to start with the first and third one. Okay, first and third one, if I add these together, I get negative 4x minus 10y plus 0z equals 4. And then if I were to write the next one, where I did the first and second one, I would get negative 5x plus 10y plus 0z equals 5. So now I can rewrite this again where I do a second substitution. So now I have my two equations, but I still have two unknowns, so I can't do anything to help out. But I can rewrite these because if you notice, I have a minus 10 here and a positive 10 here. So I can write them as negative 4x minus 10y equals 4 and negative 5x plus 10y equals 5. And so when I add these together, I'm going to get negative 9x plus 0y is equal to 9. And if I keep going, we find out that x, when divided by negative 9, is equal to negative 1. Now that I know x is equal to negative 1, I can plug it back into either one of these equations to solve for y. So let's plug it in here. And so I end up getting negative 5 times negative 1 plus 10y equals 5. And that makes this become 5 plus 10y equaling 5. And therefore 10y equals 0. So y equals 0 when I divide by 10. Double check, if we plug y in here, I end up with 0. And negative 1 in, I end up with 4 minus 0, which equals 4. So we're good there as well. The last thing we need to do, though, is solve for z. And we just plug in what we have. So I have negative 5 times negative 1 minus 15 times 0 minus 4z equals negative 11. So I end up with 5 minus 0 minus 4z equals negative 11. And therefore, when I combine terms, I subtract 5 from both sides. I get negative 4z is equal to negative 16. Divide both sides by negative 4. And I end up with z equals 4. So now, if I double check it one last time to make sure that everything worked out well, let's plug it into our middle equation. So I'm going to have negative 6 times negative 1 plus 5 times 0 minus 4 times 4. And that should all equal negative 10. Well, I'm going to get 6 plus 0 minus 16 equals negative 10. This is now negative 10 equals negative 10, and it works. So as you can see, in this problem, we had to do multiple eliminations. We had to do our first elimination to get one equation. Then we had to do our second elimination to get this equation. Then we had to do a third elimination just so that we could solve for x. Okay? When you have two variables, you need two equations. When you have three variables, you need three equations in order to find all your unknowns. And then we were able to go back and plug stuff in and find all of our variables. Well, this concludes the elimination level 3 activity. Hopefully it helps you continue going forth with everything else.